Welcome to the deep dive. We take the information you send our way and we really plunge right into it.
Yep, pulling out the most important details, the insights, trying to understand the whole picture.
And today we're diving into, well, it's a pretty compelling situation, also quite complex, frankly.
Mhm.
It involves a major American city, some of its most vulnerable residents, and, the huge pressures that come with hosting these really high-profile events.
And it's all based on just one source text that someone shared.
Exactly. So, before we jump in, a quick thank you to our sponsor for this deep dive, Flowers and Associates Property Rentals.
They specialize in special needs housing. Really important work.
Absolutely. If that's something relevant to you, you can reach them at 901-621-3544.
And also, check out the book by Robert Flowers, The Joy of Helping Others, Creating Passive Income Streams Through Special Needs Housing. A great resource.
Definitely worth a look. Okay, so our mission today.
Right, so the mission is to really carefully unpack this one article. It's reporting on a specific event down in New Orleans. And our goal is simply to dissect the different perspectives, the motivations, the actions taken, but only as they're presented in this specific text.
We're sticking strictly to the source material.
Exactly. Pulling out those key threads, to see the picture the article itself paints. We're not adding anything, just analyzing what's there.
Got it. And the source we're working from today, it's excerpts from a HuffPost article. The title is Judge Blocks Further Sweeps of New Orleans Homeless Camp Ahead of Taylor Swift Concerts.
Yeah, that title alone kind of gives you a sense of the clash of issues we're going to explore, doesn't it?
It really does. The intersection is right there.
So the task is clear. We need to draw out the crucial facts, the quotes, the allegations, the responses, everything contained within this single piece.
We want to understand, based only on this article, what happened, who was involved.
Why did different people say it happened? How did people react? And what were the immediate outcomes, from this one reported event?
All right, let's set the stage then. What does this article immediately tell us about the dynamics? When a big city is gearing up for huge public events, let's unpack this situation as the source describes it.
Okay.
So, the article jumps right in. It describes the core event, an effort initiated by state officials to clear a homeless encampment in New Orleans.
Right. It puts that action front and center.
And the article is pretty specific about the details, like who was involved and who was affected.
Yeah, it says the target was approximately 75 people living in tents. So you get a sense of scale right away. Dozens of individuals.
75 people. And the location.
Also specific. Beneath an overpass near the Superdome, which, puts it right near a major city landmark, a big event venue.
Very central, yeah. The source also names the state agencies involved in the sweep.
It mentions Louisiana State Police and Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries agents were assisting.
Wildlife and Fisheries, that's interesting.
It is, yeah. The article even includes descriptions and photos that help you picture the scene. It talks about state police give instructions to people living in a homeless encampment to move.
And shows possessions sit on a cart as Louisiana State Police give instructions. It really paints a very direct picture of state authority interacting with these residents.
Yeah, the article details the actions reported. State police were giving instructions for people to move to a different pre-designated location.
A pre-designated location, okay.
Right, and it describes the actual physical process, people moving, their belongings being transported, mentioning possessions on a cart. It sounds like a structured, directed effort by the state.
But, like you said, that title, it brings up this other crucial piece, the timing.
Exactly.
The sweep, the article says, began in the days leading up to 3 Taylor Swift concerts in the city this weekend.
Not just random timing.
No, it's presented as happening with a very specific calendar connection.
And the article really underscores how big these concerts were expected to be. It notes they could draw 150,000 visitors to the stadium.
Wow, 150,000 people.
Yeah, think about that contrast the article sets up. You've got state law enforcement clearing this encampment of about, 75 people?
The GB5, yeah.
And it's happening just as the city is bracing for potentially 150,000 visitors coming right into that same general area near the Superdome.
That's a stark contrast.
It really is. And the article clearly frames this timing as, highly significant. It strongly suggests a link, between this huge upcoming event and the state's action.
This is where, as the article presents it, it gets really interesting, connecting these things.
Right. So naturally, when authorities take an action like this, the question is, why? What's the official reason?
And the article makes sure to include that. It presents the justification given by state officials for doing the sweep.
Yeah, it specifically quotes or paraphrases Kate Kelly, who's identified as Governor Jeff Landry's communications director.
Okay, so the governor's office.
Right. And her statement, as reported, is that the effort was meant to address homelessness and safety issues.
So broad goals, homelessness, safety.
Exactly. Those were the publicly stated reasons. But according to the article, the spokesperson went further.
Oh.
Yeah, they explicitly connected this push not just to general issues, but to specific upcoming events. The article notes they linked the push to the concerts and February's Super Bowl, which will take place in the city.
So they directly mentioned both Taylor Swift and the Super Bowl.
That's what the article reports the spokesperson did, yes. The connection is stated by the official source quoted.
And the article even includes the reasoning behind making that link, right, from the spokesperson.
It does. It quotes the statement. As we prepare for the city to host Taylor Swift and Super Bowl LIX, we are committed to ensuring New Orleans puts its best foot forward when on the world stage.
Puts its best foot forward. Okay, so the city's image.
That's the clear implication in the quote provided by the article. The official rationale ties the sweep to how the city appears during these huge, globally watched events. From that official view, it's part of getting the city ready for the spotlight.
Okay, but then the article introduces a completely different angle.
Right. This is where it presents perspectives that really clash with that official line.
It mentions a lawsuit filed because of the sweep.
Yeah, and according to that lawsuit, as reported in the article, a legal observer who was actually there at the encampment.
On the ground.
Yes. They overheard state troopers saying, the governor wants you to move because of the Taylor Swift concert.
Wow. Okay, that's very different.
Very different. That quote, reported as part of the legal challenge, gives a super specific, immediate reason supposedly given right there on the ground. It's not the broad homelessness and safety thing.
No, it directly names the concert as the reason, according to this overheard statement cited in the lawsuit. It paints a picture where the concert itself was the explicit driver, at least from this account within the source.
It's a really stark contrast to the official statement about broader goals and, city image.
And the article doesn't just leave it there. It adds another voice reinforcing this view.
Correct. It includes the perspective of one of the residents, someone directly affected by the sweep.
Terrence Cobbins.
Yes. He was apparently moving his belongings when interviewed, and he says he was told to move because of the concerts.
So his personal experience, as reported, matches that overheard statement.
It seems to align, yeah. And he also voices this question that the article captures, which is pretty powerful. He asks, they ain't never did it before for other people. Why Taylor Swift?
That question really highlights the feeling, from his perspective anyway, that this time was different, that this action felt unique compared to past situations, and he's linking it straight to the concert.
So the article really lays out this tension clearly for you, the reader. You've got the official statement. Homelessness, safety, city image for big events like the concerts and the Super Bowl.
And then on the other side, you have the reason perceived on the ground, reported through that overheard, quote, in the lawsuit and echoed by a resident. It's about the Taylor Swift concerts specifically.
Right. And the article doesn't really resolve that tension. It doesn't say, this is the real reason. It just presents these conflicting accounts side by side.
Which raises that big question, based only on what's in the article. What was the main driver here? And why are the narratives so different? The article leaves you to consider that based on the evidence it provides.
Given those conflicting stories and the direct impact on people's lives and their property, maybe it's not surprising what the article reports happened next.
It's a lawsuit.
A lawsuit, yeah. A significant legal challenge was mounted in response to the sweep.
And the article is clear about who brought the suit.
Very clear. It says homeless people who were subject to the sweep. So the individuals directly affected took action. They didn't just, accept it. They went to court.
And what were their main arguments? What did the lawsuit allege, according to the article?
Well, the core claim reported is that the state troopers involved in the sweep violated their constitutional rights. That's a big claim.
Fundamental rights, yeah.
And the lawsuit apparently became specific about how those rights were violated, especially regarding their belongings.
What did it say?
The filing claimed, according to the article, that state officials were illegally searching, seizing, and destroying their property.
Illegally searching, seizing, and destroying.
Yes. And it also alleged the disposing of their prized possessions. That phrase the article uses, prized possessions.
It really stands out.
It does. It emphasizes these weren't just like random items. They held personal value to the residents. And the lawsuit alleged they were destroyed or taken improperly, without legal justification.
The lawsuit also mentioned how people were moved.
Yeah, it claimed residents were being forcibly herding them away. That suggests, compulsion, not just a polite request to relocate.
And the article connects this back to the overheard quote about the concert.
It does. It notes that the quote, "the governor wants you to move because of the Taylor Swift concert," was included as part of the lawsuit's claims.
So the plaintiffs apparently used that statement as evidence to support their case about why the sweep was happening and, why they felt it was illegal.
Exactly. So you have the residents, through their lawyers, bringing these serious grievances, rights violations, property destruction, forced movement, all linked by that quote to the concert timing. They brought all that to the court.
And what was the immediate result of this legal challenge based on the article?
Well, the article reports a pretty significant development. Judge Lori Jupiter granted a temporary restraining order, a TRO.
And quickly, too, right? The article mentions it was granted on Friday.
Yeah, it highlights that the judge acted swiftly after the lawsuit was filed by the unhoused residents. The intervention came fast.
What exactly did the judge's order do, according to the source?
The article breaks down the main directives. First, the judge ordered state law enforcement officials not to destroy or dispose of the property of unhoused people without judicial process.
Without judicial process, so directly addressing that core allegation about property destruction.
Precisely. The lawsuit claimed property was being destroyed without going through the proper legal steps, and the judge's order, as reported, aimed to stop that, at least temporarily.
Did the order say anything else?
Yes. It also included something about the people who might still be in that area, which the article calls the state sanction camp at that point.
Okay.
It directed officials to notify those people that they are free to leave.
Free to leave. What's the significance of that?
Well, it suggests maybe the lawsuit raised concerns or the judge perceived a risk that residents felt forced or coerced into moving or staying in a particular spot. So this part of the order seems aimed at clarifying their basic right to move freely within the law and making sure they weren't under duress.
I see. So protecting property rights and freedom of movement.
Those seem to be the key immediate protections in the TRO, based on the article's description. And the source notes, the order had a specific end date. It was in effect until November 4th.
So a temporary measure, but it provided immediate court-ordered protection based on the claims these residents made.
Right. Gave them some breathing room and legal backing regarding their property and movement, according to how the article reports the ruling.
It's really fascinating just reading the article's account, how quickly the legal system engaged after the lawsuit and how specific the judge's initial protections were.
Yeah, the TRO didn't settle everything, obviously, but it zeroed in on those key claims about property and freedom, showing how courts can step in quickly, as depicted here, when fundamental rights like due process seem potentially threatened.
So we have the official story, the resident's story, the legal response, but the article adds another important layer, right?
It does. It brings in the perspective of advocates, people who work day in, day out with the unhoused population. This adds, another critical dimension to the picture.
It introduces someone named Martha Kegel.
That's right. Identified as the executive director of Unity of Greater New Orleans. And the article describes her organization as a nonprofit that seeks permanent housing for unsheltered people.
So she's coming from a place of deep involvement in long-term solutions.
Exactly. And her assessment of the sweep, as reported in the article, is blunt. She called it a needless and harmful endeavor.
Needless and harmful. That's strong language.
It is. It's a direct critique from someone positioned as an expert in the field, according to the article. It immediately signals a negative view of the state's action.
And the article explains why she felt that way.
Yes. Based on her comments quoted in the piece, she argued the sweep significantly disrupted the work of local officials and nonprofits.
Work they were already doing.
To connect homeless people with social services and help them find more permanent housing solutions.
Yes. So she's framing the sweep not just as moving people, but as actively interfering with an existing ongoing process aimed at stable housing.
So, from her view, this kind of sudden action just cuts across those efforts. That's the point she seems to be making, as reported. And she also highlighted some specific challenges with the residents themselves that make these kinds of disruptions especially damaging.
What kind of challenges?
She noted, according to the article, that many of those in the camp have mental illnesses and are distrustful of authorities and those trying to help them.
That adds important context.
It really does. It helps you understand the vulnerability of the population. And it suggests that sudden, forceful interventions by authorities could actually make things worse, increasing distrust, making it harder for outreach workers to build the relationships needed to help.
And Cagle said this disruption had real consequences.
Yes, the article quotes her saying directly, "Some people were frightened and left, and that's not good."
Because when they scatter like that,
They can get disconnected from the case managers, the service providers, the support systems that were trying to help them navigate towards housing.
and she talked about wasted effort too, didn't she?
She did, very pointedly. The article quotes her, lamenting that all the work that we did to assess them and document their disabilities and, work with them on their housing plan has now been wasted.
Wow, that really hits home. The sheer amount of work involved.
Exactly. It highlights the, often painstaking effort that goes into assessing needs, verifying disabilities benefits, building trust, creating personalized housing plans. And her perspective in the source is that the sweep just undid all that crucial groundwork for those who left. It set back progress.
So if we pull all these threads together just from the article, what's the overall picture it paints?
Well, it really presents a situation where different priorities seem to collide head-on.
Okay.
On one side, you have the state's stated goal: improve the city's image for these massive events, the concerts, the Super Bowl, by addressing homelessness and safety. That's the official narrative presented.
Right.
But then, the immediate impact on the unhoused residents leads to this lawsuit alleging serious rights violations, property destruction, forced removal, with those affected pointing to the concert as the real immediate reason.
And then you have the advocates.
Yeah, the experienced advocates like Cagle saying, hold on, this whole approach is counterproductive. It's harmful. It's actually undermining the long, hard work needed to solve homelessness, not just hide it for an event. It wasted effort and scared vulnerable people away from help.
So the article doesn't really give you a simple answer or assign blame?
No, not at all. It just lays out these distinct pieces. The sweep itself, the clashing explanations, the legal fight back and the judge's temporary order, and the concerns from the nonprofits about the disruption and the human cost. It presents a really complex snapshot of these intersecting forces.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this then, just sticking to what the article presented.
Good idea. Let's recap the key elements as depicted in the source material.
All right, first, the core event. A state-led sweep. Louisiana State Police, wildlife, and fisheries agents. Clearing a homeless encampment of about 75 people. Location, under an overpass near the Superdome in New Orleans.
Got it. Then, second, the timing. The article stresses this happened just days before the Taylor Swift concerts, which were expected to bring in, 150,000 visitors?
Right. And the article also mentions the upcoming Super Bowl was part of the context given by officials.
Okay. Third, the stated justification from the state via the governor's comms director.
Yeah.
Addressing homelessness and safety.
Explicitly linked to needing the city to put its best foot forward for these big global events, city image.
Right. Fourth, the challenge to that narrative, the lawsuit filed by the residents.
Alleging constitutional rights violations, illegal search, seizure, property destruction without due process, losing prized possessions, being forcibly moved.
And crucially, citing that overheard quote from troopers naming the concert as the reason. That's the counter-narrative presented.
Fifth, the judicial response reported in the article. Judge steps in quickly, issues a TRO.
What did the TRO do again?
It specifically told state officials, stop destroying property without judicial process and tell remaining residents they're free to leave, addressing those key lawsuit claims temporarily.
Okay. And finally, sixth, the advocate's perspective, Martha Cagle.
Calling the sweep needless and harmful. Why? Because it disrupted the long-term work of connecting people to housing and services.
And wasted prior efforts, assessments, disability documentation, housing plans for those who got scared and left, undermining the actual work of solving homelessness, in her view.
So, taken together, the article really gives you this multifaceted snapshot of one moment in New Orleans.
Yeah, it shows state power being used.
Individual rights being fought for in court.
The huge shadow cast by major entertainment events.
And the complex, often invisible work of trying to deal with deep social issues like homelessness.
And importantly, the article doesn't give you a simple verdict. It just lays out these different pieces, these conflicting accounts, the actions and reactions, all based on its reporting.
So wrapping up this deep dive into the HuffPost article, we've covered a lot of ground, all drawn from the source.
We have the sweep itself, the critical timing near the concerts.
The official explanation focused on safety, homelessness, and city image for big events like the concerts and Super Bowl.
Contrasted with the claims in the lawsuit, and from residents pointing directly at the concert, alleging rights violations and property destruction.
The judge's quick TRO addressing property and movement rights.
And the concerns from advocates about disrupting long-term help and wasting crucial work.
It really highlights, as the article presents it, the multiple perspectives and forces colliding here.
Yeah, state policy, individual rights, global entertainment, local social work, they all intersected in this specific situation in New Orleans, according to this one text. It gives a really detailed look at that interaction and the different stories around it.
It does. This deep dive into the source really painted a clear, though complex picture of that moment, using only the information provided in the article you shared.
So maybe a final thought, based only on what we've pulled from this source. Think about how the pressure, real or perceived, for a city to present a certain image during major events, how that can intersect with incredibly complex social issues like homelessness.
Right.
And consider the different ways those tensions can actually surface, according to the account in this article, through official statements trying to manage the narrative,
Through the direct experiences and claims of people affected,
through legal battles focused on fundamental rights.
and through the worries of those trying to provide consistent, long-term help on the ground.
The article lays out all those facets. What really stands out to you when you consider all those details and different perspectives presented in the source? Something to mull over.
Definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complexities reported in the HuffPost article.